If you touch that Barrett, you're out of the team for good. That was the only warning Commander Hayden Greaves gave. His voice carried no anger, no drama, just a quiet finality, as if he were talking about a broken coffee pot instead of a 50 caliber rifle that could tear apart an engine block from 300 meters away. But in the searing heat of Sultan Valley, everything changed. When the team's lead sniper fell and enemy fire sealed off every escape, one person stepped forward, the last person anyone expected. Ashley Maron, the medic. The girl no one trusted to do anything but patch up wounds. Her hand hovered over the Barrett's cold steel frame. One breath, one decision. The world seemed to hold its own pulse, waiting. And when her finger closed on that bolt, the silence wasn't just broken, it was shattered into a truth no one could ignore. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to hold that weapon. And yet in that moment, the medic became something else entirely. Ashley Maron wasn't born into privilege. She grew up in a modest neighborhood near the Marine Corps base in 29 Palms, California. Summers were blistering, the kind of heat that baked the walls until they cracked. Their house had no air conditioning, only an ancient freezer her father kept alive with stubborn care. So there was always cold water, even in the desert's worst days. Her mother worked part-time at the library. Her father, James Maron, had once been Delta Force. To the outside world, he was a legend whispered about in military circles. But to Ashley, he was just the man who taught her to step lightly on sand without leaving tracks, who could slice a chicken with a dagger faster than most chefs could sharpen a knife, who told fairy tales while cleaning an M24 rifle under the shade of an oak tree. When she was 12, he brought her to a training range, not to shoot, but to listen. No one shoots better than someone who isn't afraid of silence, he told her. He taught her to measure her heartbeat, to steady her breathing, to trust patience more than strength. But one day an accident stole him from her. A training explosion, a folded flag, a brief phone call. Her mother said only one thing as Ashley clutched her father's torn sniper glove. "Promise me, child. Don't follow one death with another gun." Ashley promised, and she believed she had kept that promise when she chose medicine. She joined the military not to kill, but to heal, to save lives rather than end them. But in special operations units, medics were often seen as the weak link, the little sister of the team, liked but never respected. When she suggested upgrading medical kits for desert conditions, the commander brushed her off. When she asked to train with the rifle squad to understand tactics, they laughed. "You're a nurse, not Rambo." At camp, someone once joked, "Give Ashley a Barrett, and she'd probably sterilize it." The men laughed. Ashley didn't. She only bowed her head and kept writing in her notebook. What they didn't know was that every night after finishing her shifts, Ashley trained alone. She measured distances across her bunk room like imaginary ranges. She disassembled medical kits the way others stripped rifles. She studied ballistics in silence, preparing for a day she prayed would never come. No one knew about the small wooden box under her bed. Inside it lay her father's torn glove, a faded photograph of him cleaning a rifle under that oak tree, and a notebook filled with formulas for wind elevation and bullet drop. It wasn't a medic's journal, it was a sniper's handbook in disguise. And though Ashley had chosen healing, she could never erase the fact her father's eyes, the eyes of a sniper, still lived in her. On paper, the mission was simple. Escort a supply convoy through Sultan Valley. No major threats predicted, no signs of ambush. Just another routine movement in hostile territory. But in the desert, even routine is an illusion. The California sun scorched the earth into a blazing mirror. The UAV lost contact only 90 seconds before the first explosion. Then the canyon lit up with gunfire. Bullets rained down from hidden ridges. The convoy split apart. The lead snipers were wounded or cut off. The comms jammed. In an instant, what looked like a corridor became a kill zone. In the medical tent, Ashley was overwhelmed. One man bled from the neck. Another writhed with shrapnel buried deep in his leg. Radios crackled with desperate calls. "We can't see them. They're moving along the ridge. God, we're blind out here." Ashley's eyes flicked to the terrain monitor. She saw it, the perfect vantage point. A line of sight into the canyon choke point. A place where with the right rifle the tide could be turned. Her father's words surfaced in her memory. A person who runs from chaos is a victim. A person who steps into chaos to end it is a warrior. No one noticed as Ashley tightened her boots, wiped sweat from her brow, and slipped out of the tent. She carried only her medic's bag, but inside the side pocket she had tucked away two things: the old scope and her father's torn glove. The terrain clawed at her hands and knees as she climbed. Sand scorched her palms, sharp rocks cut at her skin. But she didn't stop. Not this time. Finally, she reached the cliff. There it was, the Barrett 50 cal, dust-covered, ownerless, waiting. Ashley slid on the torn glove. She touched the rifle with calm precision, as if her father's hand guided hers. She adjusted the scope by instinct. Wind 3 degrees left. Distance 823 meters. Targets 3 figures arming grenades for a strike that would wipe out the convoy. She lay prone, breath steady. She exhaled just once. The first shot split the canyon open. The second silenced a hillside. And in that moment, Ashley Maron was no longer just the medic. She was the one thing standing between life and annihilation. The crack of Ashley's first shot echoed across Sultan Valley like thunder rolling off stone. For a moment, the battlefield froze. Even the SEALs on the ground didn't know where the round had come from. Who just fired? A voice shouted over comms. No answer came. Only Ashley's steady breathing as she adjusted her scope. The second shot dropped an enemy gunner before he could launch an RPG. Dust clouded the ridge, but her focus was unshaken. The medic's eyes, once trained to detect a faint pulse, were now locked on the subtle shifts of enemy movement. Her third shot shattered an enemy sensor, freeing a trapped Humvee from a deadly crossfire. In 8 minutes, she fired 5 times. 4 targets down, 1 enemy system destroyed. Each bullet wasn't about killing, it was about protecting her brothers in arms below. But Ashley never stopped being a medic. When a wounded teammate screamed below the ridge, she didn't hesitate. She leapt from her position, hands flying across bandages and IV lines, stabilizing him in seconds. Then she scrambled back up, returned to the Barrett, and fired again, seamlessly shifting between healer and warrior. The SEALs fought back with renewed fury. With Ashley covering them, they clawed their way out of the kill zone. One sniper later admitted, "I used to think a nurse didn't belong on the front line. That day I saw how wrong I was." From the command center, Greaves, who once warned her never to touch the Barrett, watched every move. He didn't stop her, because he knew the truth. If he ordered her down, he'd have to take her place. And even he couldn't do what she was doing. Ashley wasn't shooting to win. She was shooting to save lives. Each round a shield, each decision an act of courage. By dusk, the convoy broke through. Not a single soldier lost. Not one vehicle destroyed. And the medic, once dismissed, underestimated, laughed at, had carried them all. When the guns fell silent and dust spread across the valley, the sweep teams counted the impossible. Not a single soldier lost, not one vehicle destroyed. In a kill zone that should have been a massacre, they had walked out alive. But whispers spread faster than the desert wind. Who fired the Barrett? Who had saved them? By the time the convoy limped back to base, the answer was undeniable. Ashley Maron, the medic, had carried the rifle, held the line, and turned the tide. No one believed it at first. No one wanted to. But the drone footage didn't lie. Vance, the spotter, had seen it with his own eyes. And when he confirmed it 3 times over comms, there was no more room for denial. The debrief room was packed that night. Not with soldiers eager for a report, but with men and women who simply wanted to see her with their own eyes. Ashley sat in the back row, dust still clinging to her medic fatigues, sleeves rolled to her elbows, the sun-darkened scar on her wrist faintly visible. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The first to break the silence was Rico, one of the unit's top snipers. He scratched his head, half grinning, half stunned. "I thought you were just medical," he said. "Didn't know you were out there wrestling with death." The room erupted in laughter, not mocking, but the kind filled with relief. Laughter of survivors grateful to be breathing. Then Vance stood. His voice was steady without humor. "If it wasn't for Ashley's first shot," he said, "I wouldn't be here." And then finally Commander Greaves rose. The man who had once warned her, cold as stone touch, that Barrett and you're out. He walked across the room, pulled something from his pocket, and placed it on the table in front of Ashley. A small metal challenge coin engraved with the symbol of an oak tree. "This was meant for a ceremony," he said. "But some people don't need fanfare to be recognized." The faint clink of the coin hitting the wood carried more weight than any medal, any speech, any applause. From that moment on, no one called her the nurse anymore. They called her Ashley. The following week, training resumed as if nothing had happened. New drills, new recruits, the same endless grind of preparation. But something had changed and everyone felt it. During a combined medical and tactical exercise, Ashley was assigned as an observer for the sniper team. One rookie whispered to another, "Is she even qualified?" The instructor didn't answer with words. He simply pointed to the sniper's glove hanging on the medical bay door. The glove wasn't new, it wasn't pristine. It was the torn glove Ashley had worn the day she pulled the trigger. "She's the only one here," the instructor said, "who saved an entire team with a single shot." From that day on, soldiers began stopping by the medical bay, not just for bandages or painkillers, but for advice. They didn't want lectures or manuals. They wanted Ashley's stories. She told them about breathing before pulling a trigger, about listening to silence before trusting chaos, about the truth her father had once told her, that strength wasn't in firing the shot, but in knowing when not to. On quiet afternoons, Ashley would swing the door of the medical bay wide open, not for light, not for air, but so every passerby could see the sniper's glove hanging there, beside a handwritten note. "Hopefully you won't need it next time." That simple gesture became more powerful than any speech, a silent reminder that healing and fighting weren't opposites, that sometimes they were the same act done with the same hands. As weeks turned to months, recruits began retelling her story. Not as a myth, not as a grand legend, but as a lesson: never underestimate the one you think is weakest. When Ashley was nominated for an award recognizing service beyond rank, she didn't attend the ceremony. Instead, she sat alone in her quarters, opening her old wooden box. Inside lay her father's torn glove, the faded photograph under the oak tree, and now resting among them the oak coin Greaves had given her. She didn't keep them as trophies. She kept them as anchors, not to glorify what she had done, but to remind herself of why she had done it, not for medals, not for recognition, only for life. By the next season, Ashley's role within the team had shifted in ways no official order could capture. She was still the medic, yes, but in training drills when precision shooting was taught, it was Ashley's voice the recruits leaned in to hear. During one dusk exercise, the wind suddenly shifted. A young soldier panicked, fumbling with his adjustments. His shot went wide. The tension in his face was the same Ashley had once seen in the eyes of wounded men on stretchers. She stepped forward without hesitation. Kneeling beside him, she placed her hand lightly on the rifle's barrel, nudging it just a fraction. "Don't fight the wind," she said softly. "Feel who's breathing beside you." It was something her father had once whispered to her under that oak tree. Now it became a phrase repeated among the unit like scripture. The shot rang out dead center. Relief spread across the recruit's face, but Ashley only gave a small nod. No applause, no pride, just a steady lesson planted like a seed. Soon a quiet ritual emerged. Every weekend when the sun dipped behind the mountains, the medical bay door was open wide, revealing the glove still hanging in place. Sometimes a new note appeared, sometimes not. But soldiers came by anyway, to look, to remember, to remind themselves that strength doesn't always come in the form you expect. Then one morning someone noticed something different. Beside the old glove, a new sniper's glove had been hung. No name, no note, no explanation. But the entire base understood. Respect didn't need words. It only needed action. Ashley's story was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. It had become a tradition, proof that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who saves you when everything falls apart. Night fell softly over the base, the kind of quiet that seemed to erase the chaos of the day. In her quarters, Ashley opened her old notebook one last time, the same one filled with ballistics formulas, wine charts, and calculations she once studied in secret. But this time she didn't write about targets or tactics. She wrote one simple line. "Today I don't hear the bullets anymore. I only hear my teammates breathing steady." Under the warm glow of a small lamp, the words looked almost fragile. Yet they carried more weight than the echo of gunfire. For Ashley, this was peace not in the absence of war, but in the certainty that she had used every part of herself, medic and sniper daughter and soldier, to keep others alive. Her father had once told her, "Don't bow to the bad. Know when to end it." She had taken those words, carried them through silence and scars, and lived them in a way even he might never have imagined. Outside her quarters, soldiers traded stories in hushed voices about Sultan Valley. They didn't speak of Ashley as a legend. They spoke of her as a reminder that the most unlikely person can change everything in a single moment. And every time a new recruit walked past the medical bay and saw the two gloves hanging side by side, they understood without a word. Healing and fighting weren't opposites. Sometimes they were the same act born from the same heart. Ashley didn't need medals. She didn't need a title. The glove, the coin, the old photo beneath an oak tree, those were enough. Because at the end of it all, she wasn't just the medic anymore. She was the proof that courage doesn't come from the weapon in your hands, but from the choice to use it for something greater than yourself. News travels fast in the military. Within days, stories about the medic with the Barrett rippled beyond Sultan Valley. Some told it like a legend, others as a joke too wild to be true. But among the new recruits, Ashley's name began surfacing in whispers, not as a hero, but as a reminder. At Camp Pendleton, a group of medics argued with their instructors, if Ashley Maron can hold the line with a Barrett, why can't we at least train with sidearms? It was the beginning of small changes, requests once dismissed, now taken seriously. Back at base, soldiers who had once smirked at her ideas about medical kits began coming to her in private. A corporal asked how she stayed calm under fire. A sniper, embarrassed but honest, wanted to know how she read wind so intuitively. She never lectured. She just shared pieces of her father's wisdom, always wrapped in simple words. Silence teaches more than noise, or the wind is never your enemy. It just tells you where you stand. One evening, Greaves himself stopped by the medical bay. He didn't say much, just nodded toward the glove on the door, then muttered, "I was wrong about you." He left before Ashley could reply, but the weight of his words stayed with her longer than any medal ever could. Weeks later, Ashley received a letter from her mother. Inside was a single line that made her pause. "You've kept your father's promise, not by avoiding the gun, but by knowing when to use it to protect life." On her first leave, Ashley returned home. She walked out to the old oak tree where her father once laid his rifle across his knees and told her fairy tales. The bark was scarred now, but the shade felt the same. She sat with the glove in her lap, breathing in the desert air, listening not for silence, but for something deeper. And for the first time in years, she felt no weight pressing on her chest. No conflict between being a healer and a fighter. Only peace, the kind her father had always wanted for her. Back at base, the tradition continued. Every Sunday, the medical bay door swung open. The glove still hung there, and sometimes a fresh pair appeared beside it. No names, no notes. Just respect passed quietly from one soldier to another. Ashley never sought to be a legend, and she never claimed to be more than what she was, a medic who happened to hold the line when no one else could. But her story lived on, not in medals or ceremonies, but in the steady breath of soldiers who carried her lesson forward. Courage isn't the shot you fire. It's the choice to use whatever's in your hands, needle or rifle bandage or bullet, to keep others alive. And that choice, once made, can echo far beyond a single battlefield.